Good afternoon, Cedarfield. How is everyone doing today? I'm Karen Wilder. I am the dietitian here at Cedarfield. For those of you who may not know who I am, we are happy that you are tuning in today. And I always like to mention that, while this is a live stream, we have now started recording the live stream so that you can watch it. You don't have to catch it at this one and done time. You can catch it anytime on YouTube or on the My Cedarfield app or website. So they're all there under the Diet and Nutrition tab. So feel free to go check it out there. I've even had residents who've told me they record it on their DVR if you're DVR savvy. So lots of opportunities to watch the show if you don't catch it at this moment. Anyway, so today we will dive right in. If you saw my little screensaver slide, that's what I'm trying to say, slide, you can see that today we are going to pour into the topic of milk. So hopefully you grabbed a big glass of milk, maybe some cookies to go with it, some Oreos, and here we will talk about all of the reasons why milk is amazing. In my opinion, milk is one of nature's most perfect drinks, food, drink, whatever. It's got everything in it. It's great. And I always kind of lament over the fact that milk is kind of seen as more of a kid's food or a kid's drink. So I always say I'm on like a one-woman campaign to bring back making it cool again for adults to drink milk. Especially, I always joke, especially in restaurants, like there's no way in the world an adult would ever order a glass of milk in a restaurant, but I wish that we could. I love to drink milk with my meals, and so I would be the one person who would embarrass the whole table. I don't do it, I just drink it at home, but I wish it would be more culturally accepted to drink milk in public as adults. But anyway, that's just my little personal rant and opinion. All right, so there are records going all the way back from ancient Babylonia, Egypt, and India, indicating that mammals, particularly our farming mammals, have been milked for the consumption of the milk. So obviously, when we think of milk, we're usually thinking of cow's milk, but there are lots of mammals, including humans, who produce milk. That's one of the things that makes us mammals, and so sky's the limit, honestly, out of the types of milk we could be drinking. But obviously, we don't drink, gorilla milk or anything like that. But other than cows, common sources of milk are goats and sheep and even camels in other parts of the world. Not as common here in America. Goat milk is, especially like goat cheese, some of the other products that come from the milk for goats, for sure. But, pretty much cow milk is, what is referred to as, or we're thinking of when we think about milk here in America. All right, and so you all, I'm sure, know that there are so many products that are derived from milk. So, of course, there's butter, cheese, yogurt, cream cheese, sour cream, all these things, whipped cream, and I think that's my list. I'm sure there are other things, and then, of course, there's all the variations of milk, which we'll kind of go through later on. But also the proteins from milk can be extracted and used in food manufacturing. Like the casein and the whey are the two most popular proteins that come out of milk, and those can be used as texturizers for other foods. They can kind of affect the consistency of foods. They can be stabilizers, emulsifiers, all kinds of things. So lots of uses for milk other than just a drink or creating all of these dairy products. All right, so let's dive into my favorite part of milk, and that is all of the reasons why milk is so good for you. And as adults, we should continue drinking milk. There shouldn't be a point where we stop drinking milk once we grow up. we should just continue drinking it all through the lifespan. It is one of the most well-rounded, like food. I keep calling it a food, even though it's a drink. But we're thinking about nutrition in general, and so differentiate. We're just kind of using food as an umbrella term. It is the most well-rounded. It's got all of the things in it that you need, other than fiber. That would be kind of the one thing it's missing, if I had to say. But it's an excellent source of good natural carbs, protein, fat, water, and then of course lots of vitamins and minerals. So we'll go through some of those. So carbohydrates. We all kind of think about carbohydrates as bad. That's like kind of a popular thing nowadays to say that carbs are bad, but carbs are not bad. We've talked about this to the extent that carbs provide calories, and calories are fuel for our body. And in fact, carbs are our body's preferred source of fuel. So we definitely need carbs. Carbs are just easy to kind of overdo and can definitely lead to weight gain and things like that. But if we are kind of monitoring the amount of carbs that we are taking in, carbs are excellent for us. And so milk is a good source of carbs, particularly lactose. And so while this is processed like a sugar and is considered a type of sugar, it's a natural sugar, and it's kind of one of those situations where you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. So if you were just to eat a spoonful of sugar, those are just calories, there's nothing else. Whereas if you have a glass of milk, yes, you're getting some sugar, which your body can use, but you're also getting all these other things that we're going to talk about. So it's good sugar, I would say. A good source of carbs for us. All right, of course, protein. That's probably, the number one thing that milk is great for, other than calcium, is the protein content. It's got excellent, complete protein. It's a good source of protein. And as older adults, everybody needs sufficient protein, but especially older adults. So in an 8-ounce glass of milk, you can get 8 grams of protein, which is great. Most people need anywhere between 50 to 70 grams of protein. So if you're drinking a couple of glasses of milk a day, you're getting a good chunk of that. So keep that in mind. And then we talked about the two types. It's protein in general in milk. There's a good source of protein in general, but then the two main proteins are casein and whey. Those are probably terms you may have heard, especially whey. There's the Little Miss Muffets, add on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. I was going to look that up to talk a little bit more about what that actually means. But basically that's what that's referring to. Casein being kind of the bigger, like when you think about curdled milk, the big chunks of curdled milk, that's usually predominantly casein. So we did an experiment when I was in school learning to be a dietitian, where you can separate out the proteins from the milk, and the way that is done is through heat and something acidic. And so it's pretty interesting because you put milk in the little beaker or whatever, you heat it up, and then you put in something acidic like vinegar, and it immediately, the curdles just pop right up to the top, float up to the top. It's really interesting. And then you can go on and do another step where then you can extract the whey out of the liquid that's remaining after you take the casein out. And so that whey protein is used a lot of times in your protein shakes, like protein powders, things like that. So they'll extract it out of dairy products and then use it for different things. So if you also think about, this is kind of, might be kind of gross to some people, but if you think about baby spit up, like we've all been around babies and when babies spit up. So that's, and when it comes up, it's kind of like these little curdled chunks. That is exactly what's happening here. That's casein. That's like curds in a sense, because you think about in a stomach, you've got heat, in a stomach, in a body, and then you've also got the acid from the stomach. So that milk, like the breast milk or the formula, would hit the stomach, and if they spit it up, that's why it's chunky, because that's the curdled milk. I just thought that was interesting when I learned that in school, so I thought I'd share it with you. All right, so the other component of milk that's good for us is fat. Again, fat tends to have a reputation for being something we should avoid, but our bodies need fat. And milk, again, you're getting some fat with that, plus you're getting all this other stuff. So I consider it a good source of fat. The one caveat is that the majority of the fat in milk is saturated fat, which is the fat we should be limiting, because that's the one that can affect our cholesterol and increase our risk for heart disease, etc. But in a glass, an 8-ounce glass of whole milk, there are 5 grams of saturated fat, which is not a huge amount. You can typically have up to about 20 grams of saturated fat a day, so it's not too bad. And then, of course, there are other options. You don't have to always drink whole milk. You can have, the milk with the less fat in it, so you can reduce that saturated fat intake. There is also some unsaturated fat in milk, about 2 grams of unsaturated fat, and that's the good fat, as we like to call it. That's the one that can affect our cholesterol and our heart in a good way, more heart healthy. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about the fat levels in a little bit later. So next is water. You hear me talk all the time about how important it is to drink water. Everybody's talking about staying hydrated, drink water. Well, milk, we might not think about milk as a way to stay hydrated, but milk is truly 85% water. So it's an excellent way to get some extra fluids in. So if you're putting milk in your cereal, if you're just drinking a glass of milk, whatever, you are getting a pretty good source of fluid to keep you hydrated. So keep that in mind. Again, there's so many good things to milk, and all these different things, like you're getting carbs, you're getting protein, you're getting fat, you're getting, maybe you're getting some calories and all sugar and all this stuff, but you're getting all these other good things. Like, it's just so complete as far as nutrition is concerned. Okay, so of course calcium, I think everybody knows that milk is an excellent source of calcium. In an 8-ounce glass of milk, you are getting about 300 milligrams of calcium, which is about 25% of the amount of calcium you should get in a day. So older adults should be getting 1,200 milligrams of calcium per day. So obviously 300 milligrams is about 25%. The dietary guidelines for Americans, which is what is put out every 5 years, and that is kind of an accumulation of all of the most current research about nutrition and the eating patterns that we should follow for optimal health. And so those dietary guidelines recommend 3 8-ounce glasses of milk every day for adults and children. So you can really reap the benefits of everything you're getting out of milk. So if you were to have that, you would be getting 75%, or the majority, you'd be getting 900 milligrams of your calcium for the day. So you would only need to get a little bit more from some other source, or you could have another glass of milk. No harm in that. All right, so some other things that milk is other vitamins and minerals that milk is a good source of. Of course, vitamin A and vitamin D. Most people know that. It's usually printed pretty prominently on the label of milk. So these vitamins are fortified, meaning they're added to the milk. And especially with the vitamin D is such a hard vitamin to get kind of naturally outside of the sunlight, from food. So, and because you need vitamin D to help your body absorb calcium, it just kind of seems logical to put the vitamin D in these good sources of calcium, which are typically dairy products. So then so it's a way to kind of help Americans get enough vitamin D, and then also to help us absorb the calcium that we're getting in milk and yogurt and things like that. And then same with vitamin A, they're adding that as kind of a fortification, so to kind of increase the amount of vitamin A that Americans are getting. I'm speaking about Americans because these are fortifications that are regulated by the USDA and the FDA, so other countries might do different things. They might not fortify the foods like we do. Okay, so we know vitamin A is a great antioxidant. It's good for our eyes, our skin. Vitamin D is great for our bones. Calcium is good for our bones. Vitamin D also helps to reduce inflammation and increase or boost our immune system, or support our immune system. So, it's probably no secret that vitamins are good for us. So, some of the other vitamins and minerals that are good sources, that are where milk is a good source of, are riboflavin, which is not a very common one, but it's one of the B vitamins. It's B2. But anyway, it's a vitamin that helps certain processes in our bodies. It's very sciencey, very chemistry. If you went back, if you took organic chemistry, you would understand how enzymes work and how they need vitamins and minerals to kind of help them work. But suffice it to say, riboflavin is a vitamin that helps our body produce energy and helps a lot of the other just kind of chemical reactions that need to happen in our body happen. So it is very important, and if you're not getting enough, you can develop symptoms of a deficiency. So a little fun fact about riboflavin, and also going back to vitamin A. So these two vitamins are sensitive to light. And so back in the olden days, maybe not so olden days, milk was always put in a glass container, like the little glass jug with the cork in it or whatever, however it was delivered. And but these vitamins can break down in the sunlight. So that is one of the reasons why milk is now either put in a carton or an opaque jug, so that those vitamins don't get broken down by the light. All right, so also from milk we can get B12. B12 is a vitamin that's very common or very prevalent in animal-based foods. So people who are vegetarians tend to have a harder time getting B12. So milk is no exception. It has, it's an animal-based food or drink, so it's going to be high in B12. As older adults, it's very important that we're getting enough B12. The needs don't necessarily go up, but B12 requires stomach acid to be processed and absorbed by our bodies. And as we get older, we just naturally start to make less stomach acid. And then we're also probably taking much more medications for GERD, acid blockers, antacids, things like that, which then also will reduce the acid in our stomach. So it makes it a little harder for us to absorb B12. So some of you may be on a B12 supplement, and that's for that reason. But milk is a great source of B12. So if you're trying to increase your B12, then milk is a good go-to. All right. So then also from milk we can get potassium and phosphorus. So potassium is good for regulating our heartbeat and also our muscle function. And getting enough potassium can prevent cramping. It's considered one of our electrolytes, when we're exercising. We want to make sure we're always replenishing those. And then phosphorus is kind of like calcium. It's really good for our bones and our teeth, also our nerves and our cell membranes, and it helps to maintain proper blood pH balance. So all of these things are benefits of milk. All of these things can help us out if we're drinking milk. All right, so now you can see, it's almost like a meal in itself. You're getting all of the things you need. If it had fiber in it, it would probably be just perfect. We wouldn't need to mess with it in any way. All right, so what about the different types of milk? So you're all familiar with, when you go to the store, you have the options. There's whole milk or full fat milk. 2% milk is considered reduced fat. 1% milk is considered low fat, and then skim milk is no fat, or it does have some fat, but very little. So the FDA and the USDA regulate how much, basically the fat that comes from the milk. It's called milk fat or butter fat. The percentage of that fat in the totality of the components of milk. And so that's, so whole milk is I think it's like 13%, and then maybe not, well, I don't know, somewhere around there. But then, once that fat is taken out through processing, then you're getting down to 2%, 1%, and skim milk. So if you are trying to limit or have minimal amounts of saturated fat, you're kind of watching your cholesterol, then I would definitely recommend the 1% or the skim milk. But if heart disease isn't too much of an issue for you, then whole milk is just fine. And then also it just depends on taste. Like, I personally love whole milk. I love skim milk. I like everything in between, but I know some people hate skim milk, some people hate whole milk. It's all a matter of taste. So, all right. So other types of milk out there there's like cultured milk, so that's going to be like your acidophilus milk or your kefir, however you pronounce it. So these are milks where the good bacteria are added, cultures are added, sort of like yogurt. It just provides those good bacteria that are really great for our gut microbiome. It's the good bacteria that kind of battles the bad bacteria that can get in there, which reaps a whole lot of health benefits in our bodies. There's also low lactose milk. We'll talk about that a little bit later. There's buttermilk, which is basically when they extract the fat out of milk to make butter, it's the liquid that's left over. And so despite the name buttermilk, it actually has very little fat in it and fewer calories. So it kind of seems like it would be really bad for you, but it's actually pretty good. And then let's see, what else? So there's evaporated milk, which is where they just evaporate some of the fluid out of it, the water. So 60% of the water to be exact. There's also condensed milk where sugar is added. There's powdered milk and instant milk, all kinds of variations and ways for you to get your milk in. All right, so what about those words, pasteurization and homogenization? What in the world do those big words mean? You see those on the label as well. So pasteurization, most people know, is just a process where we put milk through to kill all of the bad bacteria. There will still be bacteria left in the milk, but we know this pasteurization process will kill the pathogenic bacteria, or the bacteria that will cause problems. The good bacteria are left in there, or maybe I should say the non-pathogenic, the bacteria that won't cause any harm. We know it's still in there because then that's what causes the milk to spoil eventually, but it won't hurt you if you're drinking it. So milk will be pasteurized in order to kill the bacteria, and there's lots of different methods. They kind of range from, so it's either going to be a higher temperature for a shorter time or a lower temperature for a longer time to kind of achieve the same result. But then there's also ultra high temperature pasteurization, which is the highest temperature for the lowest amount of time. So it's 280 degrees for 2 seconds. That's all it takes. And this will kill the bacteria to the point where it can be stored in a sealed container, and it doesn't need to be refrigerated, and it can be shelf stable for up to 3 months. All right. So homogenizing is a process people might not be as familiar with. So this is a process where the fat, I hate to say the word globules, but that's kind of the scientific word, but think about the fat molecules or the fat in the milk, it tends to kind of glob up. So homogenization is a process they take the milk and they put it through these machines with like kind of a sheet with these teeny tiny little holes, and they push it through with very high pressure. And what it does is it breaks up those fat globules so that you have a very smooth texture and consistency. So a good example is salad dressing, where it kind of the oil and the other fluids kind of separate out, and all the the stuff in there. And so then if you shake it up, so think about like oil and water too is a good example, because that's essentially what we're doing here. They always are going to separate out, and if you shake it up really hard, it does kind of become homogenized is the word, where it's more consistent, where the fat is more consistently dispersed throughout the fluids. So that's what's happening with homogenization. So it's not really doing anything or changing anything about the milk other than kind of just making sure the fat is in the tiniest particles that it can possibly be, and then it's kind of spread evenly throughout the fluid, and it kind of creates a suspension. All right, so it won't ever re-separate out essentially. Okay, so what if we don't pasteurize our milk? What about raw milk? That's kind of coming back into fashion lately. Now that we kind of have more clean eating, natural eating, organic, blah, 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 raw milk has kind of come back to be a thing. So raw milk is unpasteurized milk, and it does harbor harmful bacteria, what we're talking about getting rid of through the pasteurization process. So things like salmonella, listeria, E. coli, etc., all of these things are in raw milk, and that pasteurization process gets rid of them. So the CDC definitely recommends that we are not drinking raw milk, especially older adults who have naturally compromised immune systems just by the nature of being an older adult. And then other people, for maybe other reasons have compromised immune systems, you're way more susceptible to becoming sick from these pathogens. In fact, it's 150% more likely to cause a foodborne illness if you drink raw milk. So it's, from a food safety perspective, it's definitely not recommended. But so interestingly enough, there are, so it's kind of left up to states to decide if they're going to allow raw milk to be sold. So there are 20 states that prohibit the sale of raw milk, and so then the other 30 will allow it. Virginia is one of the states that prohibits the sale of raw milk. There are some ways where you can get it through what's called a cow share agreement, but most people probably are not participating in cow share agreements. Maybe out in the rural areas, farmers and things like that. But for the most part, it is prohibited to be sold in Virginia. All right, so what about that expiration date? This is one of my soapbox pet peeves, rants, etc. All right, so there's the little date on milk we all know. And I can't tell you how many people I know who will throw their milk out no matter what before that date, because God forbid they drink it after that date. Well, I am here to tell you that date only relates to quality and not food safety or a safety concern. So if you drink milk beyond the date, you are not automatically going to become sick or anything. So that date is just a date that manufacturers put on there to suggest when the milk will not be at its peak quality. But again, that has not have anything to do with a safety measure. We shouldn't ignore the date, but it is not going to harm us if we drink milk beyond the date. Now, it might taste bad if it has spoiled, but that does, we should never just assume that milk is bad once you get close to or go past that date. So I always just do the quick little smell test. I do find too, when you smell milk and it smells a little sour, it might actually taste fine. Sometimes it's just kind of the remnants at the top of the carton that might have, soured a little, but a lot of times it still tastes okay. So you might even do a quick little taste test and see if it's still good, and then it's drinkable, because we don't want to waste that precious stuff. All right, so keep that in mind. So once you have open milk, it's usually good for about 3 to 5 days after that expiration date. So keep that in mind, once that date passes. You should always store your milk in the refrigerator below 40 degrees, and you should consider it spoiled if it's been in room temperature for over 2 hours. And you can freeze milk. I freeze my milk all the time. I do find that when it thaws out, sometimes you have to shake it up really good, because sometimes I feel like it maybe does kind of separate out some of the components, so I like to shake it up really good so that the flavor comes back. All right, so let's talk about the lactose intolerance, because this is actually quite common for older adults. As we get older, we become more lactose intolerant, meaning our body can't really break down that lactose anymore with an enzyme called lactase. So then it can cause a lot of GI upset. So if that's the case, then you should probably just avoid milk or dairy products. But another option is that you can buy lactase, that enzyme, and take it before you eat a dairy product, and a lot of times that works for people. Or you can consider milk alternatives, plant-based milk alternatives, like oat milk, soy milk, almond milk. All of those are really common now. It's important to make sure that those, when you're buying those, to make sure they're fortified with protein, and then a lot of the calcium and a lot of these vitamins and minerals we talked about. Because to be honest, those plant-based milks the majority of them are water, and they're not as nutritious as as our normal milk. So keep that in mind. Alrighty. So I have been blabbing on about milk. I love it. I'm a huge proponent of it. There's so much when I was kind of going through planning my talk that I didn't even cover. So maybe we'll talk about milk again. We'll have a part 2. I wanted to talk about some of the nice recipes you can make with milk and some of the different foods around the world that are, you can use milk for. So stay tuned. We'll cover that on another topic. Obviously, I'm very passionate about milk. There's lots of great things to talk about. So we will continue this conversation later. But hopefully you've learned a few things about milk. Hopefully, at the very least, you've learned not to throw milk away after the expiration date if it's not spoiled. If you do that, you will make me happy. So I encourage you to continue to drink your milk. It's not just a kid's food or kid's drink. It's for grown-ups too. So enjoy your milk. If you want to dunk your cookies in it, you can use it for cereal, Oreos, whatever. It's really good. So enjoy it. I'm pretty certain we'll be back next week. I always forget the schedule going forward, but I think usually at the beginning of the month we're in a good run. So we'll see you next week, and I appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. Bye.